Have you ever noticed how when some event happens that is unexpected, the people who are in that event each have a different rendering of it? For example, I can't tell you how many times in Afghanistan something would happen on the battlefield, something unexpected, often something violent. An IED would go off, or an ambush, or an attack on an installation. And then you go back as a leader and you try to piece together what happened, right? We call these after action reviews. And one of the things we've learned over the years is that each person has a different rendering of what happened, right? I mean, sometimes radically different. People in the same room where an explosion happens or a protest occurs, and everybody has a different view. Does that mean that, if there's 10 people in the room, that 9 of them are lying? Of course not. What it means is that each person in that room made sense of it differently than the other. It's one of our traits of being human. And this story plugs right into the theme for this week, which is how story works. And our overall monthly theme for July is narrative competence, and it's kind of part 1. Narrative competence, I frame it as the integration of storytelling, active listening, and other interpersonal nonverbal skills combined, integrated, to meet your goals and the goals of the other party, to make the deepest human connections possible so that you are relevant, the most relevant person in every room you enter. Wes, is that specific enough?
That is pretty specific.
It's pretty specific, I think. That's what we're going for. And so narrative competence is a skill. It is a true skill that requires deep work. And first, we have to understand how to get there. And of those integrated elements, storytelling, active listening, empathy, storytelling is at the epicenter of this. So this month, we're spending a lot of time talking about story. So I want to talk today about how story works. Now, I'll tell you, for my money, and I've read a book or 2 on storytelling, or 50, or 100. Right? I study story with the same passion I studied Afghan tribal dynamics. I pour myself into it, and I've been working in the craft of storytelling for years. I've read a lot of books on it. For my money, Wes, the best book out there on how story works is by Kendall Haven. And it's actually 2 books. One is called Story Proof. The other is Story Smart. And I'm reading it again right now. It's on my summer read list. They're expensive. These books are between 40 and 60 bucks, I think. But there's nobody who's done more research on how to really be smart with your storytelling than this guy, Kendall Haven, former Army veteran, by the way. So I'm going to draw from Kendall's work to help you understand how story works. If you are coming out of the military as a veteran and you're starting your own business or you need a job, if you're a small business owner and you're wanting to grow your business or create more unity in your workplace, if you are a corporate leader, if you are a stay-at-home parent, a nonprofit leader, what I'm about to show you is going to change everything in how you think about human communication. Is that too strong of a statement? It's going to change everything, right? And I'm going to try to do this really quick. And the only thing I'm going for here is that you understand how story works at a primal level. Now, first of all, you have to remember that we are story animals. We are primal creatures. Kendall Haven calls us Homo-Narratus. I don't think that's an actual term, but that's what he says. Why? Because we've been speaking stories for 100,000 years, according to carbon dating. We've only been speaking coded language for 10,000 years. That means for 90,000 years, before we even had language, we were sitting around this thing right here, pointing and grunting and creating local dialects to share lessons from the day about how to survive the hunt, the forage, how to thrive, and share those lessons in an environment around the fire at night that was safe enough that we could learn each other's lessons and integrate them into our life. Storytelling has become an evolutionary tool in our survival and why we sit at the top of the food chain. I'm getting excited, right? This is why story is so powerful. It's 100,000 years of hardwiring in every human's body. Now, what Kendall says, and I agree with it a lot, he says that humans have this thing called a make sense mandate. We must make sense of things in order to do them, in order to take a risk, to buy a product, to try a new farming technique. We must make sense of it first. That means there has to be context for it, there has to be emotion around it, there has to be a drive to do it, because humans are meaning-seeking, social, emotional creatures, right? So story delivers that makes sense mandate. It is what every listener's brain uses to make a decision. Let me say that again. It is what every listener's brain, your client, your donor, your child, they use the make sense mandate of story to make the decisions in their life. So, right, this is Joe Cool here. I'm going to get all nervous and mess it up, right? But this is Joe Cool, right? Got his sunglasses on. Right? There's Joe Cool right there, right? And Joe Cool, right, thinks that he doesn't need story to make decisions. He doesn't need story to act, right? He just takes the input, the PowerPoint, the commercials, whatever, and he makes decisions on that. Absolutely not. That's not how the world works. Joe Cool actually takes information through his eyes in what he sees and also in what he hears, right, from other human beings. Those are the two primary receptors that Joe Cool has to process information, right? And the thing is, we all agree that the frontal cortex of Joe Cool, right, is where it all ends up. In the frontal cortex is where the decision is rendered. But before it gets to the frontal cortex, this information that the eyes see and the ears hear, the spoken word, the written word, it is actually made sense of in what Kendall Haven calls the neural story network, or the NSN. And it's a series of parts in the brain that actually form a network to include the amygdala that link up, take that sensory information from the eyes and the ears, process it, and make sense of it before it ever goes to the frontal cortex for a decision. And it is story that comes in and provides that ability. This is the crazy part. If a story does not carry the information into the listener's brain, the listener will create their own story to make sense of it before processing it to the frontal cortex for formal decision. Am I making sense so far? Now here's what you need to know, because your customers, your clients, your donors, your children, when they have to make their own story up because there's no story accompanying the information you're giving them in that 80,000 page PowerPoint deck, two things are constant. One, the listener's story is often inaccurate. That's not helpful. And two, the listener's story is often negative about you or whatever external input is coming in. So not only, right, does the brain require story to make sense of things before it renders a decision on whether to buy from you, invest in you, follow you, it will make up its own story if you don't provide one. So, as we go into narrative competence this month and in the following months, and we get deep on human connection, story is not an option. It is mandatory. It is required for every human to make a decision. And if you don't create one, the listener will. And instead of you owning your story, someone else will own your story. And it's almost guaranteed that they're not going to have the kind of perspective that you would want them to have as a client, customer, donor, child. And it's probably going to be kind of negative towards you, right? So give that some thought, process that around. We're going to be talking about this all week. If you like this kind of stuff, if you're serious about making human connections, we're not casual about it in our tribe, you need to check out rooftopleadership.com/mastery. Our tribe dives deep into this stuff with our Rooftop University online learning, our monthly coaching calls. We're really getting hot on this right now, so you want to join us. And also our private team room page where I put challenges out where the people in our tribe work on this every day. Powerful stuff. This blog went a little long, but I needed it to so that you understand at a baseline level right now how stories work. And I'm telling you, if you know what I've just put out, you've got an edge, a huge competitive edge in life and business. Get to work building your story. Until next time, I'll see you on the rooftop.